It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Tickets. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Chris Ballard was supposed to address the media today, and that did not happen. He's apparently a little bit under the weather, which has people out and about making up some conspiracies. So, almost a decade ago now, Ryan Grigson was fired by the Indianapolis Colts. As we all know, one of the biggest mistakes that the Colts had made. And the interesting thing about Ryan Grigson being fired was that Jim Irsay announced that he would be returning. And then 2 weeks later, he told him to hit the road, and Chris Ballard getting sick conveniently the day before, he's supposed to address everybody about his team. And it just has people making up these conspiracy theories of maybe Jim Irsay has changed his mind. Maybe he is going to fire Chris Ballard. I gotta be honest. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I hope I'm wrong, but I would be incredibly surprised if Jim Irsay went back on his word and decided to fire Chris Ballard. I would be, because it's 8 years of him making this exact same decision every single year to keep Chris Ballard around. I don't think that Jim Irsay is in good enough health to conduct a general manager search. And so I don't think that Chris Ballard's going to be fired, even though the hopeful people on Twitter are pretty amazing. Now, the NFL season is over. And, I played baseball for a long time. And if someone was to ask me, Jonathan, what's the most important thing about playing baseball? Like what is the thing that allows every great player to have success, or even average players to find some success? And the most important thing isn't like a good swing or fast hands or good hand-eye coordination. All those things are important, obviously, but not the most important thing. The most important thing is you can't be scared of the ball. Okay, like there are plenty of talented 9 and 10-year-olds who play kid pitch for the first time ever, and they're so terrified of getting hit that they stop playing after they're 9 and 10 years old. Like there are plenty of guys that are probably good enough to play infield, but, the ball gets hit at you at 98 miles an hour. All of a sudden, some guys don't want to play infield anymore. And so you can't be scared. And I do my best to approach my radio show in a pretty similar way. I am not afraid to make big takes and big predictions. Okay? That is an important part of this radio show. And so before the season started, I did this thing. I called it Final 5 Takes. And the 5 days leading up to the start of the NFL season, I gave 5 big takes. And in the 5 days leading up to the start of the Colts season, I gave 5 big takes. Some came true, some did not. And I just think that we should take some time to review them, because some of them I got absolutely horrendously wrong. Others, I did a pretty good job. I got them right. And so without further ado, let's get into that. True takes and mistakes throughout the entire football season. Jonathan Taylor, before the season, he was obviously a very well-known topic, right? The starting running back, one of the 5 best running backs in the NFL, a guy who got paid not all that long ago. Before the season, I predicted him to run for 1,300 yards and only 8 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor ran for 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns. So a little bit better than I thought that he would be. I thought I was pretty close. I only said 8 touchdowns because I thought that the Colts would rely on Anthony Richardson's legs in the red zone. That wasn't the case early in the year, but as the season progressed and as it became more and more obvious that Anthony Richardson was not polished enough throwing the football, they ran him more and more in the red zone. We had a really good year from Jonathan Taylor. I hate that he dropped that football before crossing the goal line against the Broncos, because that is just going to overshadow this year for the rest of his career because he had an awesome year this year, right? Behind a banged up offensive line for most of the season and against teams, in those games with Joe Flacco where everybody knew that he was going to get the football and it just didn't really matter. He was still great. So hopefully he can continue to be a force next year. Either way, the Colts need a second running back to lighten his load. Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson are just not, they just aren't good enough to get, to share carries with Jonathan Taylor. I fully expect for the Colts to draft a running back at some point during the draft this year. My first miss, and not even my worst miss in terms of my preseason big NFL takes, was I said Anthony Richardson was going to have a total touchdown to turnover ratio of 3-1, and I didn't come close to that one. Not even close. Anthony Richardson finished the season with 14 total touchdowns, but he turned it over 13 times, so at least he was a net positive in terms of touchdowns to turnovers. I thought he'd run for more touchdowns than he did. I thought that would be the majority of where his touchdowns came from, and they didn't. I think part of that was early in the year, it seemed like the Colts just didn't want to run him very much. And when you learn that he's had a disc issue in his back for the last decade, then, it makes sense that they didn't want to run him as often. So, really bad miss there. It's all right. It happens. The bad thing, though, is that's not even my worst miss. That's not even my worst preseason prediction. Okay. And trust me, we're going to get to it. And when you hear it, you're just going to laugh. I laughed. Like when I was going back through my old notes last night, I started laughing. And my wife was like, Jonathan, what's so funny? And I was like, I'm just a complete idiot. And that's not the case with this next prediction, though. One of my other predictions from the preseason was that Michael Pittman Jr. would not lead the Colts in receiving this year. Got this one right. Michael Pittman Jr. finished as the second leading receiver on the Colts. Alec Pierce finished first, which I did not expect. I figured it'd be Josh Downs. Michael Pittman Jr. beat out Josh Downs by 5 total yards, despite Josh Downs playing in less games than Michael Pittman Jr. Josh Downs did lead the Colts in receiving yards per game. Alec Pierce was second in that regard, followed by Michael Pittman Jr. third. With all the issues that this Indianapolis Colts roster has, receiver, they're fine. Okay? Like, they don't need to draft a receiver this year. I don't think that they need to go and get one in free agency. I think that they're fine the way that they are. They have much greater needs than just wide receiver. Okay? Like, a lot of needs on defense, a lot of needs in the secondary and a linebacker. So if the Colts were to not draft a wide receiver early this year, then I would have absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. So if you want a glass half full thing today, there you go. The Colts are fine at wide receiver. The Colts defense. This is the worst one that I had. This is the worst take that I had. And it's absolutely atrocious. The Colts defense will be top 5 in sacks. They were like 26th. And they'll be one of the 10 best defenses statistically in the NFL. By far, my worst take of the year. Colts defense was awful. The defensive line underachieved greatly. Like it was just an abysmal performance by them all year. They weren't anywhere close to being top 5 in sacks. The only thing that they were top 10 in defensively was takeaways. And as I've said several times here on the show, takeaways and turnovers forced, that is a luck stat in the NFL. So yeah, that was my worst one. It was just, absolutely brutal decision there. We're learning lessons though, as we go, and I will highlight them at the end of this when we get through all of these just horrendous takes that I made before the season started. My final Colts prediction before the year started was, I thought that they'd be 10-7. Colts went 8-9. Thought that they'd be a fringe playoff team. They had a chance late. That Jonathan Taylor dropping the football before crossing the goal line against Denver probably cost them a playoff spot. They finished at 8-9 as opposed to 10-7, which is where I had them finishing before the year started. With that being said, can't wait to go 9-8 next year. Going to be an absolute blast. Moving on to my just general NFL predictions from before the year started. I did a little bit better in this regard. Bryce Young, I said that he was going to be way better this year. And he absolutely was. Didn't start off that way, got benched, came back, played really well through the second half of the season. He was just significantly better after getting benched for Andy Dalton. Kind of a similar thing with Anthony Richardson, except Bryce Young was much better than Anthony Richardson was. He won twice as many games this year as he did last year in 4 less starts. His completion percentage went up. He threw for more touchdowns in less games. He threw less interceptions. His QBR went up by 20 points. His passer rating went up by 10 points. Bryce Young was much improved. Okay. And if you watched him at all his rookie season, I mean, you know how awful it was. And so maybe that gives you a little bit of hope for Anthony Richardson next year. Not me, though. Bryce Young, just an incredible turnaround, speaks to the toughness and the resiliency to continue working and continue getting better, even in the face of adversity. Bryce Young, way better. Check that one off. I got that one right. Oh, man. One that I got wrong, though. Stefon Diggs to the Texans. I said that Stefon Diggs to the Texans was overrated and that the Jaguars would win the AFC South. The Jaguars did not win the AFC South, but I don't think I was that far off on the Stefon Diggs to the Texans thing being overrated and the Texans just in general being overrated. They went 10-7. If they were in a good division, they probably wouldn't have made the playoffs. I know Stefon Diggs got hurt, but he was never their best receiver at any point. I don't think he would have made them any better than where they finished in terms of them being 10-7, but they did win the division while the Jacksonville Jaguars just fired their head coach. And I'm going to blame it on Trevor Lawrence being hurt through most of the year and then missing a bunch of games late. We're just going to blame it on that. Something I got right, though, I said that the Chiefs and Lions will be the number 1 seeds. Yeah, that one was not hard. I got this one right. The Lions had the best roster in the NFL coming into the season. So it was pretty easy to pick them to win the NFC. The Chiefs, it's Andy Reid, it's Patrick Mahomes. You figured that they'd be a little bit better than they were last year, and they are. These are the 2 best records in the NFL. You could argue that they're the 2 best teams, both sitting there at 15-2. They're both coached outstandingly well. Andy Reid, arguably the best coach in the NFL. Dan Campbell, what he's done, you can make an argument that he's the best coach in the NFL, the way that he gets guys to buy in and to play hard. And it's just really impressive. Both of these teams, they do it very differently, right? But this is the cool thing about football. You can build teams and call plays and design things differently and still be really good. Okay, the Chiefs feel a little bit more calculated. They play in more close games. There's a lot on the shoulders of Patrick Mahomes in this defense. And then you look at the Lions, and, Jared Goff has been outstanding this year, been really, really good. With that being said, like Ben Johnson, I think takes a lot of pressure off of Jared Goff. They run the football consistently well. Chiefs, Lions, I said that they'd be the 1 seeds, and they are. I also said that Jared Goff or Patrick Mahomes would win the MVP, but neither one of them is going to. The premise still stands because I do believe that Josh Allen's going to win the MVP. He's like minus 420 in sports books because he's the starting quarterback of the 2 seed in the AFC. Coming into the season, 7 of the last 10 players to win the MVP had been the quarterback for the 1 seed in either conference. And for 12 years in a row now, the MVP winner has been the quarterback of the 1 or 2 seed in either conference. I do believe that streak is going to extend to 13 because I do think that Josh Allen is going to wind up winning the MVP this season. Last one, or no, I've got 2 left that I predicted. One is still on the board. It hasn't come to fruition yet. Before the year started, I picked the Chiefs to beat the Rams in the Super Bowl to have the first three-peat in NFL history. The Rams, they're good, 9-3 in their last 12 games to finish the season. They're healthy. They got the Vikings, which is just a brutal first-round matchup for them. But they chose this. They knew that when they rested their players that they were going to get the Lions or the Vikings. And so they made their bed. I got all the faith in the world in Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford. So that's still very possible. The Chiefs are getting 24 days off. They're probably going to play the winner of Chargers and Texans, and they should beat whoever wins that game. And yeah, so feel really good about that one. That one's still on the board. And then probably the crown jewel, my best prediction from the offseason was saying that the 49ers would miss the playoffs. I said this. I got so much pushback. I had people calling me stupid. They're like, Jonathan, you're just a stupid at the time 24-year-old. Your frontal lobe isn't fully developed yet, and it's showing right now. And hey, I ended up being right. I said that they would struggle with injuries because they had outstanding injury luck last season. It's the oldest roster in the NFL, and it's just really hard to bet on that team, especially a team that has made so many deep playoff runs and just has more miles on their body. And they don't look, Brock Purdy, really good player. 49ers probably, they should pay him in the offseason, but, he's not Mahomes or Lamar or Allen or Herbert or anybody like that. And so they just didn't have the quarterback to help elevate them when guys got hurt, and that was blatantly obvious this season. So great NFL season. Had some absolute home run takes, and I had some absolute awful ones. Just absolutely awful. Really fun, though. That's what the show is. We make big takes. All right? That's what the show should be. Okay? So hopefully you've enjoyed listening to all of my big, insane, or big, super accurate takes from throughout the season. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I've learned some things throughout this NFL season. Just a couple of things that I've learned kind of based off of the opinions that I've made throughout the season that I've either been right or wrong. So I want to touch on those. And then I would like to talk a little bit about the Pacers. They're surging 10-5 in their last 15 games. One of the best teams in the NBA as of late. Tony East, he's set to join me at 11 o'clock, and we're going to talk about the Pacers and why they're playing so much better. But first, when we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about some of the lessons that I've learned from this NFL season.
Unfiltered takes live here. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on, The Real Jonathan Smith Show? Here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. It is Wednesday. Tony East of Locked On Pacers is set to join me coming up here at 11 o'clock. The Pacers are surging. I am going to talk about that a little bit today. Indiana taking on USC tonight. But I want to continue talking about the NFL because I've learned a couple things. I think it's important to look back and reflect, all that important stuff. Reflect on the things you got wrong, reflect on the things you got right, and then make adjustments, right? Like that is what New Year's resolutions are really all about. It's figuring out where you struggled the previous year and making the adjustments to hopefully be better in those areas going forward. So after this NFL season, I've got one big thing that I've learned. It's something that I'm hoping I'll abide by. I probably won't, but we'll see. And that is, I think it's very important, and I think we're going to see a shift in the way that NFL teams draft quarterbacks. Quarterbacks who have played a lot of football in college, I mean, I don't know how you bet against these guys, because that is the one thing about this quarterback class that's true. We've had a pretty good rookie quarterback class. Like Caleb Williams, 20 touchdowns, 6 picks on the year. Had some really good games, had some not so very good ones behind a really bad offensive line. Jaden Daniels showed up in Washington and has taken them to the playoffs. They won 11 games. Bo Nix showed up in Denver. They won 10 games. Okay. And all three of those guys played a ton of football in college, right? Like Bo Nix holds the record for most games started in the history of college football. And he was able to show up, and he struggled the first couple weeks, but he figured it out from there. And part of that is Sean Payton, but part of it is just the fact that Bo Nix has played a lot of football. And, Jaden Daniels showed up and was impactful immediately because he's played a lot of football, played a lot at Arizona State, and then, obviously transferred to LSU where he played a lot more. And so I do think that we're going to start seeing NFL teams draft quarterbacks that have played more college football than other guys. Like the days of drafting Trey Lance is really high because Trey Lance barely played in college. Like if you think Anthony Richardson didn't play much, go back and look at what Trey Lance did. He started half a season, played one spring game, COVID hit, he declared for the draft, and he was the number 3 overall pick. The San Francisco 49ers gave up not 1, not 2, but 3 first-round picks to trade up and draft him. Okay, so I think the days of drafting guys like that are long gone, especially if we see college football make the rule change where they allow guys to play for 5 years. That is something that has been proposed. I really hope that they don't do that, but we'll see what they wind up doing. I think that we're going to see NFL teams start to pivot towards that because of the success, the immediate success we've seen from these, college quarterbacks that have played 3, 4, 5, 6 years, their ability to come into the NFL and immediately be good. And let's just be honest, if you're a general manager, the number one job for all of these guys is to keep your job. And if you know that a guy that's played 6 years in college is going to show up and have more success immediately, you're probably going to take that guy. I am very intrigued to see what happens with Arch Manning this next season because he's a highly anticipated guy down there at Texas who sat the bench for 2 years. Are NFL teams going to swoop in and grab him really quickly if he declares for the NFL draft after only playing 1 year of college football? Will that impact his draft status at all? Probably not because his last name's Manning, but I do think that it's something to watch for. The other thing that I learned this year is don't make takes based off of Gus Bradley's defense. Oh, man. And then finally, just the importance of having a tough head coach. I need a sign in here just to remind me of one of my favorite coaching stories I think I've ever heard. When Steve Kerr was hired on to be the head coach of the Golden State Warriors, he went out to dinner with, I think, Greg Popovich or one of his mentors. And he was super excited. And he's running through, I'm going to call these different types of plays for Steph to get him good shots. And we're going to work Klay Thompson off of him in this way. And we're going to have Draymond Green do this. And like, he's just running through all of these different things that he's going to do X's and O's wise. And whoever he was getting dinner with was like, well, that's great. But like, how are you going to like get these guys to buy in? How are you going to manage these guys? And Steve Kerr was like, I hadn't even thought about that. And through watching Dan Campbell and the Lions, Dan Campbell manages his roster, manages his team better than any other coach in the NFL. It's why they can win games when they have 12 defensive players on IR. It's because he gets those guys to buy in and he manages his roster incredibly well. I am completely and totally guilty of what I'm about to say. Ben Johnson is the hottest name of any potential. Actually, that's not true. Mike Vrabel is the hottest name of any potential new head coach in the NFL, but Ben Johnson is directly behind him. And what is he? He's the new hot offensive coordinator that is a really good play caller and designs all these funny trick plays where they can throw touchdown passes to offensive tackles. And it's really cool and it's fun. And he's clearly a very smart guy, a guy who does an excellent job of calling plays. But being a head coach is way beyond the X's and O's. It's being able to connect with people and to communicate. And that is one of the things that I have to remember going forward if I want to not sound like an idiot whenever I'm talking to you. With that being said, the Pacers are surging, which is unsurprising. They are 10-5 in their last 15 games. They've been one of the best teams in the NBA during that stretch. I mean, they're clicking right now. And part of it is they're healthy. Part of it is Tyrese Halliburton is back and, he's rolling and he's healthy. And, we're going to see kind of, how if he can continue to play at this level, this all NBA level that he played at last year. Once again, Pacers 10-5 in their last 15 went 10-4 or are 10-4 over the last month and 9-3 in their last 12, all of that good stuff. Throughout this 15-game stretch, the Pacers are 5th in the NBA in offensive rating. They're up to 9th in the NBA on the season in terms of offensive rating. Like, they are absolutely clicking on the offensive side of the ball. And the reason for that has to do with Tyrese Halliburton, Pacers players getting healthy, and young Pacer players learning their role. Let's start with health. Andrew Nembhard doesn't always post major numbers, but his impact on the game is always obvious on both sides of the ball. But we're talking about offense right now, so let's focus on that. He's a secondary ball handler, right? He takes some of the pressure off of Tyrese Halliburton. He can really shoot the ball open. You feel like it's going to go in. Okay, he can put it on the deck and get a shot. He can get to the rim. Really good from 12 to 15 feet. Having him back has been huge for the Pacers offense because he can also create, and he's just another guy who you can give the ball to, and he can go get a shot. Ben Shepherd is also back, and he just gives them so much more spacing. He fits so well. I love watching him play because the ball is never in his hand for longer than 2 seconds. He's either going to catch and shoot, he's going to catch, maybe take a dribble and get rid of it, or he's going to catch it and just keep the ball moving and then cut. It's really fun to watch. It's just like basic fundamental basketball of making quick decisions and making the defense react quickly to wherever the ball is going. He's been really good this year. Aaron Nesmith, he's hopefully going to come back soon. When he comes back, he'll do the exact same thing of if he's open, he'll shoot it. He's probably a little bit better creatively in terms of putting the ball on the floor and getting to the rim, but he'll fill a similar role of 3-and-D and just be smart with the ball. Jarris Walker, he's starting to figure that out as well. They got him playing a lot more with the second unit. He looks good with them, not great. There's still some moments where I'm like, what in the world is going on with this kid? And then there's some other moments where I'm like, yeah, like he looks like an NBA player right now. So Jarris Walker slowly starting to figure things out. Ben Shepherd has been a huge boost for them just in the spacing and the shooting. Benedict Mathurin, he's rolling right now as well. I mean, he's playing really well. You can tell that the Pacers are better when he's on the floor. Over these last 15 games, the Pacers offensive rating with him on the floor is at 115.3. And over the last 15 games, the Pacers defensive rating is at 105.8. That is a net rating of 9.5. Okay. When Benedict Mathurin is on the floor for the Indiana Pacers, they are 9.5 points better than their opponent. So Mathurin, he's, figuring out how to fit into this team that's got a lot of good players and a lot of good offensive players, which is big for the Pacers because they're going to need him if they want to make a run in the Eastern Conference. Okay, so players are back. Young players are getting better, figuring out their roles. And Tyrese Halliburton, most importantly, is back to normal. He's been on an absolute tear as of late. The Pacers' offensive rating is at 118 when he's on the floor. And more importantly, more impressively, their defensive rating is 109 when he's on the floor. That's a net rating of 9. That's huge for him because he was just such an abysmal defender last year. Boston, New York, everyone tried to take advantage of him, and he has greatly improved as a defender. Okay, he's finally starting to make shots. He's averaging 20 points per game, shooting 38% from three, 47% from the floor, and he's still an elite playmaker, averaging 9 assists and 1.5 turnovers per game. Okay, he finally looks like his old self from last year, and that's why the Pacers are ultimately 10-5 in their last 15 games. Pascal Siakam continues to play well. Miles Turner, he's posting a career high in three-point shooting percentage at 39%, while also attempting the most threes per game that he has in his career at just under 5 a game. But I quickly want to go back to Halliburton and the improvements that he's made on defense. Tyrese Halliburton has become Steph Curry-like on defense. Okay, he does a really good job chasing shooters. He plays the passing lanes well, and he's consistently in the right spot. Playing defense in the NBA is incredibly hard. Like it is like having to defend those guys on the ball is basically impossible. Okay, because the guys are just incredibly skilled now. But here's my thing: if you're 6'6" with long arms like Tyrese Halliburton, if you're just in the way, you're probably going to get some stops just because you're huge. Okay, and that's what we've kind of seen more of from Halliburton this year. His team defense is better. Is he ever going to be a one-on-one ball stopper defensively? Absolutely not. But he has gotten better defensively, and that is really what the Pacers have needed. And you can really see it here as of late. Defensively, the Pacers as a whole, they are way better than what they were last year as of late. And Aaron Nesmith, their best perimeter defender, he's not even back yet. They're 16th in the NBA in defensive rating over the last 15 games, which, look, you can be 16th in defensive rating if you're 5th in offense. Okay, like that is totally acceptable. And a large part of that is because they've gotten healthy. Nembhard, Ben Shepherd, they're back. Benedict Mathurin has been much better defensively this season. And, of course, their leader and best player, Tyrese Halliburton, is much improved in that regard as well. So Pacers, they're surging. Tony East of Locked On Pacers, he's set to join me coming up here at 11 o'clock, and we're going to continue talking Pacers. Indiana, they play basketball tonight against USC. This is another game that they should win, but USC, Eric Musselman, the Must Bus, it's coming to town, so it'll be tough. I've got some thoughts on some stuff going on in the NBA that is not Pacers related that I absolutely love, and then I might get to a little bit of NFL playoff stuff as well. So a bunch of stuff to get to, and we'll get to it here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice day. Thanks for tuning in no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Twitter, the Indy Sports Ticket app, or maybe you're listening via 1430 AM. Big shout out to Facebook. And I say that, and and you know they're changing a bunch of stuff, but that's not why I bring them up. The best feature of the Facebook app on your phone is the fact that it'll tell you when people's birthdays are. During the break, I had to run to the restroom, and I checked my phone, and I had a Facebook notification reminding me that today is my dad's birthday. And I was like, oh, let me send that text right now before I forget once again. So happy birthday to my dad. I almost completely and totally forgot. So big shout out to Facebook. Also, big shout out to the Indiana Hoosiers, who are 12-3, proving me right, saying, you know, don't freak out. This team's really talented. They're going to find a way to win games just because they're so incredibly talented. And tonight, they're going to play USC, another team on their schedule that they are undoubtedly more talented than. Honestly, I feel like this is something I'm going to say about just about every single game that they play this year. They are more talented. I don't know if I'm going to say more talented than every team in the Big Ten, but they're more talented than a lot of them. I will stand by that. And the USC Trojans, this is definitely a team that is not as talented as the Hoosiers are. And this is another game that Mike Woodson and the Hoosiers should win. It is, undoubtedly. Okay, with that being said, I do think that this game is going to be tough because USC has an excellent head coach. They do. USC, new head coach in town, Eric Musselman. Dude is excellent. Okay, look, if you're new, I grew up in Arkansas, been an Arkansas fan my entire life. Okay, grew up hearing stories of Nolan Richardson led, Arkansas, 40 minutes of hell, and then Mike Anderson shows up, and we called it the fastest 40, and that didn't go very well, so they bring in Eric Musselman. And for the first time in my life, I got a taste of what my dad talked about, what was going on in the 90s. Like, the loudest environment I've ever been in is Bud Walton Arena when John Calipari got tossed playing against Arkansas. And it happened, and Musselman, I think, was more excited than the fans were. And it was just incredible. And I remember going to, the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight games here in Indianapolis when Arkansas made a deep run. And I'm just telling you, Eric Musselman is an excellent coach, and his team is going to be incredibly well prepared to play against Indiana tonight. They are going to have a really good game plan that prepares them for everything that Indiana is going to throw at them. Okay? And so if they are not ready to play tonight, they will lose. Last time I checked, they did not have a line out for the game today. I am going to double check that right now because I'm very curious because, I think a lot of times whenever it comes to gambling and betting these games, we just kind of think about the players, even though coaches, especially in the world of college basketball, need to be thought about. USC, Indiana tonight. Indiana is a 6.5-point favorite. They're playing at home. And this is going to be tough because I know Eric Musselman coached teams. They're going to be tough. They're going to be well coached. They're going to defend their butts off offensively. They're probably going to get stagnant because that's what the must bus just kind of looks like. This is a game that Indiana should win, no doubt about it. I don't know if Malik Reneau's playing or not. Whether he is or isn't, they should win this game either way. Okay? Like, if you want to be upset if they lose this game, I won't blame you in the slightest. In terms of Indiana being uber talented, I'm looking at this list of Big Ten teams. And I'm just like, who is more talented than Indiana? Minnesota's not. You could argue that Rutgers is at the top, but I think roster-wise, top to bottom, Indiana is more talented than Rutgers. Indiana's more talented than Northwestern and Maryland and Washington and USC. Ohio State's a good team, but like Indiana's more talented than they are. They're more talented than Penn State. Oregon, I don't know. Oregon's really good, but would still probably lean Indiana. Definitely would lean Indiana over UCLA, who got throttled last night by Michigan, lost by almost 20 at home as well. And so Michigan, that team's really good. Indiana's more talented than Nebraska and Iowa. Wisconsin's a good basketball team. Indiana's still probably more talented than they are. I mean, Indiana brought in the number 1 transfer class in the country. Indiana's more talented than Purdue. I don't think Indiana's more talented than Illinois or Michigan. Not too sure about Michigan State. That's probably a toss-up. So Indiana is going to be in an excellent spot to win a lot of games this year. If they continue to shoot it as well as they have recently, then they're going to be just fine. Okay, because that was the big thing last year. They just didn't shoot the basketball well enough from 3. And, we're just in this day and age where if you don't shoot the ball well, then, if you can't make threes, then you're probably going to lose. It's just the reality of the basketball world today. So Indiana, they're going to play against a tough USC team tonight. Indiana better be ready to go. Hopefully we find out whether or not Malik Reneau is playing at some point soon. With that being said, I do want to go back to the NBA and talk about something that I think is important. I love what the NBA is doing. So if you haven't heard, Jimmy Butler, bit of an issue everywhere that he's been, forced his way out of Chicago, went to Minnesota, forced his way out of Minnesota, went to Philadelphia. Philadelphia was like, you know what? Too big of a problem. We're going to roll with Tobias Harris. Now Jimmy Butler's in Miami, and he's like, you know what I'm sick of? Miami, which I don't know how anybody, who's young and has a whole bunch of money could get sick of Miami, but hey, whatever. So now he's like, I've lost my joy, which is just the biggest load of crap ever. He's lost his joy because they haven't extended him. And now he's trying to force his way out. But this is the best thing, but the new trade regulations in the NBA have made it much tougher for him to be traded. Part of why the NFL is the superior product to the NBA, I think there's 2 reasons. First and foremost, I think people just love violence. Like we love the UFC and boxing and football because they are physical. They're just really physical sports. And there's something in every human that likes seeing that likes seeing grown men crash into each other, both moving incredibly fast and just beating the snot out of each other. Like there's just something inside of us that likes that. Okay, which is fine. That's just the way that we are. I also think that part of why the NFL is a better product and more watched than the NBA is because the owners have all of the power in the NFL. They control everything. And look, most owners in the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, whatever, they are all incredible business. They're all incredible business people who know how to sell stuff and know how to get people interested in things. Okay, smart people, right, or smart in different areas of the world, who are able to buy professional sports teams. Like they are smart people who know how to get people interested. Most of them, not all of them. And the NFL is a superior product to the NBA in part because they allow owners to make more decisions than players. Like that is just the reality of it. Whereas the NBA it's all about players. And this slight tweak in the rules in terms of salary cap and trading players has shifted some of the power back to NBA owners. Okay. And when it comes to the NBA, this is a fantastic thing. It is an awesome thing. Part of what makes the NFL great is that I know that Patrick Mahomes is going to play in a Chiefs jersey for like 17 years, and then he's going to be old, and Kansas City is going to draft somebody new, and then he's going to leave, right? But that is the cycle of it. But Patrick Mahomes will be remembered as a Kansas City Chief, just like how Peyton Manning is remembered as an Indianapolis Colt, because he was here for a decade and a half. Okay. And the NBA is not like that. There is no loyalty, there is no real true commitment. Whereas in the NFL, you see guys, I mean, you got to commit to it every single week if you want to play in the NFL. And I think that this slight tweaking of the NBA and how they trade and all these things is a sign that things are going in the correct direction. I think that if the NBA wants to see a resurgence in ratings and things, like this trend of, I wouldn't even call it a trend, but this slight movement towards owners having a little bit more power and teams having a little bit more power needs to continue. I love that Jimmy Butler was like, I went out, and Pat Riley was like, okay, we're going to suspend you. um, and so I think it's great. And I think more teams should do that. I also think that this slight tweak has led to a better product. Like Jimmy Butler wanted to trade before the year started, realized that it wasn't going to happen. And so he played through, this much of the season. Zach LaVine, who wants out of Chicago, he's having to play because there's just nothing available out there for these teams to make trades. And so I think this is a good thing. The fact that the owners and the teams have a little bit more power than the players do, because part of why the NFL is so successful is because people aren't committed to players. People are committed to teams. That has been one of the fundamental issues with the NBA for a long time. Like, you were not a Peyton Manning fan. You were a Colts fan, and Peyton Manning just so happened to land on your favorite team. The NBA doesn't work that way. And, the NBA is, for a lot of people my age, I am a LeBron James fan. And then they just kind of follow him wherever. And then when he retires, they lose a lot of fans who were just interested in LeBron James. And so that's the other thing with the NFL. Like, look, we can complain about Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen and Jim Irsay and everything, but at the end of the day, you're a Colts fan. And next year, at the start of the season, when the Colts are 0-0, you're probably going to sit down on your couch and watch the Colts play football because you are a Colts fan. And the NBA just doesn't quite work in the same way. Speaking of the NFL, the playoffs, they're starting up rather soon. We've got the, college football playoff that continues tomorrow. Notre Dame playing against Penn State. I'm going to talk about that game tomorrow. I'm actually really looking forward to that. But yeah, I'm super excited for the NFL playoffs. They start up on Saturday. Texans, they're playing the Chargers at like 4:30 or 3:30, whatever that time is. And then the Saturday night game between the Ravens and the Steelers should hopefully be good. Going to be interesting to see if Lamar Jackson can exercise his NFL playoff demons, because he's struggled in the playoffs. No doubt about that. And it's going to be fun. I think everyone should pick the Chiefs. I don't know if you did or not. I know that's who I'm picking to win the whole thing. But if anyone beats the Chiefs, I think it's going to be the Bills, because the Bills have this guy named Josh Allen who's playing the best football of his career. With that being said, the Bills and Ravens, they're both awesome, both very capable of beating the Chiefs. But if I had to pick one, I would pick the Bills, just because I trust Josh Allen more than Lamar Jackson in the postseason. The reason why the Bills have lost to the Chiefs have not been because Josh Allen was bad. Like, that has not been the case at all. Okay. It's usually been because the defense hasn't lived up to their side of things. And, last year, Stephon Diggs dropped a ball. If he catches that deep pass, the Bills probably win that football game. I say probably because it's the Chiefs, and they just kind of figure out a way to win every game that they play in. But the main reason, though, why I'm picking the Bills, why I would pick the Bills to beat the Chiefs before I pick the Ravens, is because of the defense. More specifically, the passing defense. When you look statistically between the Bills and the Ravens and where they rank, it's pretty similar across the board, except for in one area. The Ravens have the second worst pass defense in the NFL. The Bills are 24th, which isn't much better, but that's way better than second worst. Okay, now to the Ravens' credit, they do have the best run defense in the NFL. But I just find it hard to believe that the second worst pass defense in the NFL is going to beat the best quarterback in the NFL, a guy that if he three-peats will have a legitimate argument to be considered the best quarterback ever. And I think that the lack of consistent pass defense from the Ravens and the inconsistency we've seen from Lamar Jackson in the playoffs is why I think the Bills would have a better chance at beating the Kansas City Chiefs. That and just the fact that I've seen them almost do it multiple times now. That Ravens team last year, getting the Chiefs at home and not being able to beat them was insane. And so it's really hard for me to pick the Ravens to do it because as good as they are, I still feel like that team last year was better because they were just so much better defensively than what they are this year. Even though offensively they're amazing, second best offense in the playoffs behind the Lions. So maybe they just show up and they outscore them, but the Chiefs defense is pretty legit. So I'm not too sure that that's going to happen. We are entering into, the NFL playoffs. Prime basketball season's right around the corner. USC, they're taking on the Indiana Hoosiers tonight. I believe that the Pacers play tonight at 7. They do. Maybe not. Am I tripping there? Yes. They do play tonight. They play tonight at 7. They're going to host the Chicago Bulls. They are 6.5-point favorites in that game. And I've got Tony East joining me coming up here at 11 o'clock. We're going to talk Pacers, why they're so much better, and just kind of the outlook on the Eastern Conference going forward. Tony East joins me here in about 4.5 minutes.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. Pacers starting to play better, finally. 10-5 in their last 15. Tony East of Locked On Pacers joins me now to discuss the Pacers, why they're playing better, and how it's just about time that this finally happened. Tony, what's going on, man?
It is about time. It was really weird seeing this team that everybody thought would be good end up being 10-15 at one point, but that's where we are. So over 5 is not an accomplishment, and yet it feels like it after the start they've had.
It really does. 10-5 in their last 15, 9-3 in their last 12. What's the difference? Is it just Halliburton's gotten better? Is it just that they're finally somewhat healthy? Why have the Pacers been so much better as of late?
Yeah, Andrew Nembhard's return's been a really big part of it, both because he's playing pretty well, obviously. You know, he takes on tough defensive assignments. He's making shots. He's another ball handler, and we know how much the Pacers like to play with 2 point guards, right? But he also returned at, I think, a key time, and that's kind of right around that gap of practice time they had during the NBA Cup. And going 0-4 in the NBA Cup may have helped their season, ironically, because not only did they get 4 days off before 2 games and then 3 days off after, but they played New Orleans and Philly. So they had 7 days to practice out of 11 days, and they played 2 awful teams. And ever since then, their defense looks fine. Not good still, but way better than the bad level they've been at for a lot of the season. And that gives them much more margin for error, and it lets them play in transition more. And Andrew Nembhard has helped that defense, but Ben Mathurin's defending better. The bench is defending better. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, if they guard just okay, just like the 20th best team in the league, and their offense is a little better because they have all their weapons back, they're a pretty good team. So health, practice time, Nembhard, lots of stuff has helped, I think. Lots of players are playing better. But I think all of that in tandem, kind of around that mid-December mark, really let them hit the ground running coming out of that break.
It really did. And this is, I think, one of the other advantages of the NBA Cup is you get some of these teams like the Pacers who get banged up. They get all this time off to get healthy and practice and do all of those things. And like you said, the defense is so much better. The Pacers are 16th in defensive rating over their past 15 games, which is, look, if you're they're 5th in offensive rating over the course of that time too. And it's like if you're the 5th best offense in the league and you're average on defense, like you said, you're going to win a lot of games. I've been really impressed with Mathurin as of late. I feel like he's just much better at picking his spots offensively, and you alluded to it earlier, just the effort on defense. What are you kind of seeing with him? Why is he playing so much better?
Yeah, so many things have really changed for him, and it all feels kind of it's so weird because talking about this stuff feels really demeaning. Like, he's really talented, but the stuff he's doing well is like really simple stuff that somehow, just for some players doesn't click right away. But his steals are down in a good way because he's sitting in a stance better all the time, and he's keeping on his guy, and he's not have as many possessions as a team defender where he just falls asleep and a play develops right around him and he doesn't do anything about it, right? Or all sorts of stuff like that really, when it happens for a full game and he doesn't have all these lapse plays, he looks really good on that end of the floor. I think, ironically, the first game I noticed Ben Mathurin playing really well on defense was that Philly game I mentioned earlier. He had a lot of reps that night where he was guarding Paul George. Paul George had a terrible game. And I think ever since then, he's remained pretty solid on that end, engaged the whole time. And he's paired that with good rebounding, which he's always been good at for his position. He's paired that with catch and shoot, no hesitation. He's paired that with less possessions where he's not certain what he's going to do when he gets the ball. He's just very quickly decisive, whether that's pass, shoot, drive, all the stuff that he needed to be improving on to really help this team win has finally kind of started to happen in this last month. And Rick Carlisle said it best, like, all that stuff is great. And a lot of it too is not driving into traffic as much, right? A couple years ago when the league was calling every foul under the sun, that was great for him. He drove in the lane, he drew a lot of fouls. When they got away from that, he had to tweak his game a little bit. And finally, at this point, I think we're seeing him hit the right balance of what he needs to do to keep starting for this team and keep that spot he's got versus, what the best version of maybe he thinks he could be with the rim attacks. I think we're seeing the perfect balance right now. He looks awesome.
He does. Joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Follow him on Twitter at Tony R. East to see everything that he's got going on. He's been better. Jarace Walker, a little bit better. Still
Yeah.
some inconsistencies there, but he just looks a lot more comfortable. The thing though that I have been most impressed by might be a stretch, but something that I've just really noticed this year. I feel like Tyrese Halliburton has become a much better defender, which isn't saying a ton. But we've heard Rick Carlisle mention a lot this year, just the importance of positional size. Like that's, really good defensive teams just tend to be bigger. And when you have a guy like Halliburton,
Yeah.
who's 6'6", if he can just be where he's supposed to be and get in the way, he's going to generate some stops. Have you noticed the improvement from Halliburton on the defensive side of the ball?
I have, yeah. And, a lot of it to me is like team defense stuff, which is what he said, like he wants to be better at. Like he always thought people gave him a little too much credit for his team defense. Obviously his on-ball defense still needs work, but like when he's rotating as the low man or he has to read the play and help or whatever, he's been really sharp in those moments. Like he actually is being a deterrent that the defense has to pay attention to. That's been really important, right? That gives him value on that end of the floor because, it is telling about his defensive on-ball abilities that he does get the assignments he gets every game, right? That he's not guarding the best guy or the second best guy for the opposing team ever. But if you're going to be guarding their third best perimeter player, if you defend well in team defense, you're still going to have a good impact, right? So unless they're playing Boston, basically, who has like an endless supply of good players and it's hard to hide him, there is a way he can pitch in on that end of the floor, even if it's not like the most awesome thing ever. And it's the same kind of thing with Mathurin, where you don't see it in the steal numbers. You don't really see it in the block numbers. It's not like he's making defensive plays. He's just preventing the other team from making plays in a way that he maybe didn't in past seasons or didn't even earlier this year. And that, I think, has been really important for him and the team. And that starting five, I mean, when it's specifically Halliburton, Nembhard, Mathurin, Siakam, Turner on the floor, the Pacers defense has been like top 5 level in the league the last month and a half, right? And every other lineup does not have that, right? Because it's not as good. But Halliburton and Mathurin improving on defense in tandem has been a big part of that lineup isn't a joke or just okay on defense. Like that specific five can actually hang, and that matters a lot.
It does. And I think one of the impressive things also with the defense from the Pacers is their best perimeter defender hasn't played in forever. Do you know when Aaron Nesmith is supposed to come back?
Soonish, I would say. I don't think it's a very unique injury, as Carlisle's explained. I think he actually hurt the same ankle twice in that game. If people remember, he first he landed on Willie Green, and then he kept playing, and then he landed on someone else or landed kind of weird. I can't remember what the play was exactly, but I think it's not exactly 2 injuries. It just made for a unique situation with what his injury was and what the recovery was. But I mean, I've seen him running more. I've seen him shooting in practice with the ball. I think he's done a little bit of 3-on-3 stuff or maybe a tiny bit of 5-on-5. So on the mend, not quite, maybe not quite ready. He's not going to play tonight against the Bulls, but it's possible that pretty soon he could be back. And then they'll have to answer some hard questions about how they shift their lineup. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I think last year he was their best perimeter defender. I think Andrew Nembhard might hold that crown now, but the fact that they're close is very telling, and you can always use a player who can make threes and defend. They're going to need Nesmith, but what his role is going to be fascinating.
It is. I'm very interested to see how Carlisle tries to balance all of the good players that they have, which is a good problem to have. Joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Miles Turner this year has been really good. I think even amidst the struggles, he's shooting a career high from 3 at 39% on the most attempts he's ever taken per game. Do you think part of it is he's just shooting better? Do you think he's taking better shots? Why do you think Miles Turner has been better this year, I would say, than he was last year?
Yeah, the shooting's a huge part of it. They just trust him to make the shots. People early in the year were really down on his play, and I totally get why. A lot of the stuff that he had shown important growth in the last couple of years kind of retreated. His inside the arc finishing hasn't been as good. Early in the season, it was pretty rough, but it's recovered. It's still below where it was last season, but that specifically is his paint finishing at the rim. He's still been about where he's been the last couple of years, but in the paint for mid-range, he's been off. But the threes are falling at a high level, right? So honestly, I think if you're the Pacers, at some point you say, who cares? Stop taking the mid-range shots at all. Just finish at the rim and make the threes. The other thing that he struggled with this year was turnovers, right? Really early in the year, he had a ton of Miles Turner, what was that? It was just a soft turn and give it away, or he'd get pressured with the ball and give it away. By far his most turnovers per minute early in the year. So all that stuff is still happening, just less than it was early in the year. And at the same time, he's making threes at a very high level, currently a career high rate. We'll see if that holds. His 2018-19 season was still really good there, but the volume part matters too. Like you said, almost 5 a game. There's a chance if he plays and stays healthy, this will be the most threes he takes in a season. And there's some defensive recovery this year, right? I don't know if he's been, he'll never reach the levels he was in the late 2010s, but his block numbers are up from last year. I think the last couple of weeks, his defense has been awesome. He just had a 3-steal, 3-block game in Brooklyn. I think his defense has taken a little bit of a step forward. And again, it's like Nesmith, I just said, like you pair good shooting with good defense, that's a good player. And so while some of the stuff that they need him to be better at is still there, the fact that he's doing those two things well has really helped.
It really has, joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. So the Eastern Conference is better than I thought it would be this year. Miami Heat, like they're about to switch up a whole bunch of stuff. Currently, the Pacers are tied for 6th in terms of record. Where do you think the Pacers sit right now amidst the best teams in the Eastern Conference? Like how many teams do you think are there that are like legitimately better than them?
Man, that's tough to say because the Bucks are currently sliding. I think the top 4 are probably better than them this season. So that the top 3 is very obvious, right? The Cavs are the best team in the league right now. The Celtics are probably still the title favorites, even though they're not playing great. And the Knicks just won like 14 in a row or whatever it was. They've lost 3 in a row right this second, but before that they had won a bunch in a row. I think those are kind of cemented as the top 3. And then Orlando, man, they're only 2.5 games ahead of the Pacers. They're 5-5 in their last 10. Like that all sounds bad, but then you got to remember, like half their team is hurt, right? They lost their backup centers out for the year. Jalen Suggs is out, Banchero's out, Franz Wagner's out. Like they can't do anything. So I can't even believe that they have the record they have. When they're healthy, they're probably better than the Pacers this year. Jamal Mosley is just churning out something out of nothing every night. It's unbelievable what's going on with the Magic. So I'd say those 4 are probably pretty clearly better than the Pacers. The Pacers have a losing record against the Magic, even against the Knicks. They did beat the Celtics twice. Then you get to like this long slog of teams that are currently all separated by 2 games, which is Milwaukee, Miami, Atlanta, Detroit, and Chicago. If you're the Pacers, your goal should be to be better than all of them, right? Every single one of them for the rest of the year. I think Miami's doable. I think Atlanta's doable. Detroit and Chicago, who knows what their goals will be, right? The Detroit currently won 4 in a row, but like, do they really want to be good? Do they want to make the playoffs, or do they want one more good draft pick? Same question with the Bulls. I know they don't want to be good, right? So it should be easy for the Pacers to stay ahead of a lot of these teams. The question is, can they actually pass them in the standings? I think with Miami imploding, like you said, they should be considered better than maybe all those teams but Milwaukee. Milwaukee's beaten them twice this year, but even Milwaukee really struggling of late, and their only good win of the last couple weeks was, ironically, their comeback against the Pacers. So if the Pacers keep it rolling and can get a win or 2 against the Bucks, they play them 2 more times this year, they have a case to say they're the 5th best team in the East. I don't know. Some people would say they could catch Orlando. I don't know. The Pacers are playing better than them of late, I would say. But they've got work to do, and there's so little separation. And maybe one day, I don't believe it'll happen, but maybe Philly will eventually figure something out. I don't know. They're still. I don't think they will. I mean, every time I think they're turning a corner, they lose some pathetic game. So I imagine they'll still make the play-in, but there's just a lot of teams from Philly to 5, and I think the Pacers' current level is above all those teams, but their November level was obviously not. So how they settle in for the next couple weeks before the trade deadline will kind of reveal where I think they can land there.
Joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. The Knicks thing for me, just about the Eastern Conference as a whole. Look, the top, like the best version of the Knicks is awesome, but they only play like 6 guys. And how big of a deal do you think that's going to be? Just like throughout the regular season, like they're playing their starters like 40 minutes a night in the regular season, which is not normal. We saw the lack of depth, I think, hurt them in that Pacers series last year. Then again, part of that was because of injuries. This year, it's just like we have 7 guys that we could play, and that's it. Which for Tibbs, that's clearly more than enough for him. But I just, because of that, I'm a little hesitant on the Knicks. Cleveland has the best record. I'm so excited tonight. I very rarely do this, Tony.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'll be like, hey, listeners, you should carve out your schedule for 7:00 tonight because the Cavaliers are going to play the Thunder. But I legitimately think that people should. You could argue that these are the 2 best teams in the NBA. What do you kind of think is going to happen in that game tonight between Cleveland and Oklahoma City?
Yeah, they both won a bunch recently. I mean, I think I saw that this is like the earliest in the season that two teams with 30 wins have ever played each other or something like that. You know, they have a combined 9 losses. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's something like that,
Let's
right?
go with it. That sounds cool.
Yeah. They're both really good, right? And the Thunder, it's so stupid the way the in-season tournament championship game works that it doesn't count, but the Thunder have won, 15 in a row or something, right? Like, it's going to be a sweet game. And I've been pumping up the Thunder to a lot of people who aren't like huge NBA fans, because a lot of people who have the thought of like, oh, I don't like all the threes. Can they watch the Thunder, man? Like, they don't take that many threes, and their best player gets all his shots from like the free throw line and in primarily. And Shea, he's just so good at carving up these little puppies and drilling them against anybody. And then they run into the Cavs, who are a buzzsaw, and the Cavs are just like every single rotation player is playing well this year, and they have these awesome lineups, and they can all shoot, and they can space it out, and they look really good, man. I mean, they have the best offense in the league and a really good defense, and their defense is actually worse than it was last year. I think they have a higher level on that end of the floor, whereas OKC is the opposite. They're a great defensive team and like a pretty good but not great offensive team, right? That's really fun. Like, that clash of styles will be awesome. Look, I think the Cavs are really great. I think they're going to finish as the 1 seed in the East this year. They deserve it. They're probably going to make the conference finals. I think the Thunder are better. I think their defensive style just gives them so much room for error. And every game they play is the same. They're like down 5 at halftime, and their third quarter is kind of a rock fight. And then all of a sudden in the fourth quarter, like, no one can score, and the Thunder just win that quarter 28-15, and they win the game. It's crazy, but they do it every night because their starters are so good defensively. They just kind of feel out a game, figure out what they need, and get it done. I'm really psyched for this game as well. I think the Cavs are going to surprise some people. They did that a couple times. Like, they had a national TV game against Boston. Darius Garland was awful. They were missing, I think, Jared Allen, and they almost won that game, right? Like, they could do it even limited, and they're not limited, so I think they're going to play well. But I think the Thunder are better. I think the Thunder are the best team in the league, and I hope they show that tonight, because they've been really good since early December. They haven't lost them forever.
I agree with you. I think the Thunder are the best team in the league. I think Boston's better than Cleveland, even though they aren't. It's really funny. It's like Boston's not playing very well right now. Meanwhile, they're 27-10. Like they're still awesome. And like my holdup with Cleveland is, I don't know. Like, I just feel like the fact that Darius Garland's 6'2" maybe is going to hurt them at some point. I just remember Boston singling out Halliburton last year, and I just feel like that's going to happen to Cleveland when they play the Thunder and the Celtics. But then again, like, when you have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen behind you, like, go to the rim. That's fine. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how Cleveland tries to hide Garland going forward. Last thing that I want to touch on, and then I will let you go. Does it bother you that LaMelo Ball is leading all NBA guards in All-Star votes? That was the case the last time that I checked, and it drives me crazy, man. I can't stand it that he has this many votes.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. For reference for people, the last time the Thunder lost a regular season game, the Pacers were 9-12, so a long time ago. Yeah, pretty crazy. That people locally can get that part. Yeah, it is wild. I know why LaMelo Ball is so popular, right? Because of the way he got to the league. He does play a very fun, flashy style. He takes threes. Last night he had that crazy off the backboard pass. By the way, I don't know if you saw that play.
I did.
That highlight went crazy. It went viral. They didn't even score. They missed the shot. It was obviously a cool pass. I'm like, okay, we need some standards on these things. It's like, I get why he's a popular player. It just every year it's the same thing, right? It's like all these popular players dominate, even though they're not playing that great. And LaMelo's only played 24 games this year. I mean, his stats look awesome, I guess. The Hornets stink. Like, it is really weird the way that people are just encouraged to vote for the players they want to see, which is fine. I guess that's what the All-Star game is. But I feel like the NBA could do better by saying, vote for the players you think have played the best, right? I get that the All-Star game is a joke now, but it still like matters to player resumes to be in there. And I get that it's only the starters that have the fan vote element as a part of it, but it does always hit weird to me when it's like very clearly this not the best player is getting the most votes. And yes, again, he's popular, but he's not popular because he's good or his team's good. His team's never been good with him on it. They've never even made the playoffs, I don't think. So it's got to be some sort of culture shift from the league to get people to vote what I would consider right, because it's just kind of a joke right now.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I lied. This is the last thing that I'm going to ask you.
Oh, okay.
Jimmy Butler, once out of Miami, I love that it's incredibly hard for them to make this trade. I think part of why the NFL is a better product than the NBA is because owners have more power than players, and I just think that owners are smarter in terms of making leagues watchable, if that makes sense. So I love that this is really tough on Miami to make this trade. I love that they're suspending Butler without pay. I think it's awesome. I don't really know who's going to make this trade because it seems like every team's going to have to give up just a boatload of stuff for him. Where do you think he winds up playing?
Yeah, that's the problem, is that it seems like the perception is that it should be a lot of stuff, and I don't really understand why that's the case, right? It kind of feels like it should be a small amount of stuff, especially because there's only a few teams that are he's actually willing to re-sign with, right? It sounds like. And so if I'm, I thought Memphis always made sense as a fit, but why would they be motivated to go get Jimmy Butler? I mean, we literally got a report yesterday that he wouldn't stay there. So why would they trade a lot for him? And so that all sounds great for Jimmy. The Heat are probably really annoyed about it. And at some point, right, he was an All-NBA player 2 years ago. The player participation policy says, good luck, buddy. You can't not play him. Like, they can't just send him home like they could with a non-All-Star player. So it's going to be really tough to see how they kind of wiggle out of this once his suspension's done if they can't find a trade, because I don't know how high his value should be because he has that player option. He could leave next year. And it seems like the only team that should be like extremely motivated to get him is Phoenix, but they can't. They don't have the stuff to do it, and nobody wants their only matching salary that makes any sense. So it's really hard to imagine how this goes in a way that Butler or the Heat wants. I feel like the landscape of the league, the way the salary cap setup is right now, like the most likely outcome is that he's actually not traded and they have to figure it out in the summer, because right now it's just there's no logical fits that make sense. And I think a lot of pouting is going to be going on in Miami because it's just a very hard scenario. And they've both parties, the team and the player, deserve some finger pointing on how they got to this situation, but that's how it is right now.
Some other superstar would have to get upset. Like if the Suns wanted to move Bradley Beal, that seems like the only way that this trade's going to happen.
The problem is all the other superstars or stars or like high salary players who want to get traded, like, are also all negative assets. And that's why the trades are things like that. Zach LaVine and CJ McCollum and Michael Porter Jr. and Beal, like you said, Vucevic, like all these guys, like maybe it makes sense for them to be traded, but how? Like they're paid too much and they're not as good as their contract. So it's been hard for them to be moved. So it almost just feels like all those teams should just like swap crappy stuff with each other, right? You deal with this problem instead, someone else, right? Would that make everybody happy? But it'd be a really complicated trade. But that's kind of what it seems like is the most likely thing to me if he is traded, is one of those other high salary contracts that the team doesn't want is involved, and the Heat have to deal with it because they don't have another option.
I think it'd be hilarious. I want this to happen. It won't. Joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Send Jimmy Butler to New Orleans. I think that'd be incredible. Watching him having to deal with like Zion Williamson, just knowing that he didn't like Karl Anthony Towns, because Karl Anthony Towns is a happy guy who is a little more relaxed than Jimmy Butler would like. I couldn't imagine him having to deal with Zion Williamson, who for the first time in a long time looks like he's actually in shape. I don't know if you saw his 360 windmill last night, but he looks thin.
I saw him play defense for 30 seconds without a shoe, and he forced to stop. It was sweet.
I want him to be good so bad. He should be, but he's just I don't know. He's
no one plays like him. I love players like that. Nobody plays like him.
Is he as immature as Anthony Richardson? That's the question. I do
not know either of them well enough to actually know that.
Yeah, I was gonna say you don't have to answer that. That's something for upset Colts fans. Tony,
all of them. That's all of them.
Yeah, that's all of them. Chris Ballard, man, get him out of here. I don't know, but Tony, thanks for your time, man.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
See you. That is Tony East. You can follow him on Twitter at Tony R East. He's the host of Locked On Pacers, also hosts Locked On NBA from time to time. Great guy, does an excellent job of covering your Indiana Pacers. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, we're going to review my takes from the year. We're going to talk Colts, Chris Ballard, all that good stuff here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice day. Colts, Chris Ballard, general manager, he was supposed to do his end-of-the-year press conference today, but he is sick, so he did not do that. I don't think a time has been rescheduled for him to do his end-of-the-year press conference, which is a real bummer. My Ballard bingo card was for sure going to be awesome, and I hate that I'm having to wait to actually do Chris Ballard bingo, because that's just it would have just been an absolute blast. And since this has been postponed, I like optimism. I do. Like, I like glass half full stuff. I like, just trying to be positive. Doesn't always work out, but it's a nice thing. And with the press conference being postponed and Chris Ballard all of a sudden being under the weather, we had some conspiracy theorists come out. So Chris Ballard was supposed to do his press conference today, but it got postponed. And, all these tweets, because, Twitter is what everybody's thinking, come out and people are like, oh, what a coincidence. Chris Ballard postponed. And then people started to remember the fact that Jim Irsay famously announced that Ryan Grigson would be returning as the Indianapolis Colts general manager. And then 2 weeks later, he was like, nah, and he fired Ryan Grigson, and toughness walked out of the door with Grigson, as the famous Venturi said. I got to be honest, I don't think that is what's happening here. Okay, I really wish that it was. I hope that all of these conspiracy theorists saying that, Chris Ballard's going to get fired, I hope that you're right so desperately. But I just don't think that you are. I think that Chris Ballard is firmly locked in. He will be the Colts general manager until he has like Dumbledore length hair, right? Where it's running way down his back and it's white, because Chris Ballard's 73 years old and he still hasn't cut his hair because, he hasn't won a Super Bowl. In fact, at this point, he'll have changed his bet from, I'll cut my hair when we make the Super Bowl. He's changed the bet from, I'll cut my hair when we win the Super Bowl to, I'll cut my hair when we win double-digit games in a season. That is honestly the future of the Colts right now. At least that's what it feels like. Chris Ballard isn't going anywhere. It's cold outside, okay? Probably just got sick and didn't want to be, sniffling into the mic all game or all press conference. So hopefully we get an update on when that Chris Ballard press conference is going to be. I really hope that it's tomorrow morning. Just because I'm very intrigued to see what he's going to say, very intrigued to see what promises he makes, because he's going to have to, at some point, he's going to have to change something, you would think, or he's going to at least have to say that he's going to change something. And I'm very interested to see what that is. I'm going to write it down. Like, if he comes out and he's like, look, I need to be more aggressive in free agency, then I'll say, okay, and I'm going to write that down, and we're going to track whether or not he winds up being more aggressive in free agency, one way or the other. Like, we have got to find, or I really, really hope that he figures out a way, to sell us on some bull crap. That way we can track him on it. We can call him out for it. I'm ready for this press conference. I'm ready to see what all he has to say, because I don't think that it's going to be awe-inspiring in any way, shape, or form. Something that I hope is awe-inspiring tonight is the Indiana basketball team. They're playing host to USC. It's another tough game for Indiana. There's just a lot of good coaches in the Big Ten. That's kind of what I've noticed when, watching these teams. I feel like they're all very well coached, which is, I wouldn't say half the battle, but actually, yeah, no, it is half the battle. It's incredibly important to have a good coach in college basketball. And when you look top to bottom, there's just a lot of good coaches in the conference, and Eric Musselman is on that list of good coaches in the Big Ten, someone who has been through the Eric Musselman experience. I can tell you right now, USC is going to show up. They're going to play incredibly hard. They're going to play excellent defense, because that is just something that Eric Musselman's teams always do well. They always defend really well. The offense will get stagnant in spots, and when that offense gets stagnant, Indiana needs to go on runs, okay? It is incredibly important for that to happen if they want to beat a team in the USC Trojans that they should beat, right? Like, this is another game on Indiana's schedule that they should undoubtedly win. They are more talented. Doesn't matter if Malik Reneau plays or not. they are still more talented with or without Malik Reneau. I hope that we continue to see dominance from Omar Ballo. If he continues to play this way the rest of the season, I'm not going to say that we have to give Mike Woodson credit because he should have set the tone before the season started that players don't need to be out late at bars the night before games. But I do think that we'll have to acknowledge the fact that Mike Woodson was able to set his potentially star center straight, because if he continues to go out and get 25 and 12 and 17 and 12 and so on and so forth, and he continues to be this dominant presence on the interior, then you have to feel great about Indiana's chances, not just, in games tonight, but also in games going forward. When we come back here in about 3.5, 4 minutes or so, we're going to talk Colts. We're going to continue to talk Colts, review my takes from the year. Some were great, some were not so great. All that coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
Hey, it's Rich Eisen here. Join me and my compadre, Chris Brockman, every Monday on the Overreaction Monday podcast. You're also saying the record's going to go down.
I'm saying the record's going down anyway. The guy.
I don't think you're off on this at all. Like, you're spot on here. I don't think this is an overreaction because we have no idea what we're reacting to. Come react or overreact with us.
Overreaction Monday. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
It's game over. Over.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. That intro is exactly right. Unfiltered takes here on the real Jonathan Smith Show. We've been piping them out all season long, and we're going to review them now because we believe not only in strong takes here on the real Jonathan Smith Show, but we believe in being held accountable. Okay? And if you say something, like, we should undoubtedly follow up on it. So before the NFL regular season started, I did this series. I called it Final 5 Takes, and I went back and I found all 5 of the takes. So I did 5 NFL ones, and I did 5 Colts specific ones. And some of them are great. Some of them are awful, like just absolutely abysmal. We're going to start with one kind of in the middle, something that I was pretty close on before the season started. I said that Jonathan Taylor would rush for 1,300 yards, but only 8 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor finished the season running for 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns, pretty close there on the numbers. I said only 8 touchdowns, though, because I thought that the Colts would rely on Anthony Richardson's legs in the red zone a lot because it gives you an extra blocker when you're on the quarterback and all of that kind of stuff. And that turned out to be true in the second half of the season. It felt like the Colts relied more on Anthony Richardson's legs in the red zone than they did to start the season. So I feel like I was somewhat right on that one. Either way, it was a great year from Jonathan Taylor, one of the best running backs in the NFL still. Lived up to the money that Chris Ballard decided to pay him this year. Hopefully, he can continue to do that. I do think, though, that in order for him to do that, the Colts need to find a second running back somewhere in the NFL draft. Just because, like, he had 34 carries on Sunday against the Jags in a game that didn't really matter. I do think that as Jonathan Taylor gets older, because, look, 26 years old is kind of old for a running back in the NFL. You need another guy to spell him. You need another guy that's just an actual threat to carry the football. Sorry, Trey Sermon. Sorry, Tyler Goodson, but you guys aren't real threats to actually carry the ball. One that I completely and totally whiffed on, Anthony Richardson. I said he was going to have a total touchdown to turnover ratio of 3-1. Not even close. Anthony Richardson had 14 total touchdowns on the season. He turned it over 13 times combined between interceptions and fumbles. I thought he'd run for more touchdowns than he did. He only ran for 6. I thought that would be the majority of where his touchdowns came from. I thought the Colts would give him easier throws than what they did. That didn't happen either. So, yeah, just got this one completely and totally wrong. And the sad thing is that wasn't even my worst miss. Just wait until you hear some of the stupid things that I said before the season started. Michael Pittman Jr., this is something smart that I said. I said Michael Pittman Jr. would not lead the Colts in receiving yards this year, and I got this one right. Michael Pittman Jr. finished second on the Indianapolis Colts in receiving yards on the season. Alec Pierce finished first, which, to be fair, I did not expect. I figured it would be Josh Downs. He finished third, although he did lead the Colts in receiving yards per game. He just was hurt this year, right? Missed week 1 because Nick Cross tackled him in 7-on-7. So he missed a game there. He ended up 5 yards behind Michael Pittman Jr. If you want something good that happened with the Colts this year, like, they have 3 legitimately good, 0 great, but 3 legitimately good wide receivers. Like, Alec Pierce is good. Michael Pittman Jr. is good. Josh Downs is good. There's just no great out at the wide receiver spot. But if the Colts can add a good tight end this year, then I think we'll feel really good about their pass catchers going into next year. My worst take by far is this next one. I said that the Colts defense would finish top 5 in sacks. They weren't in the top 20. And I said that they have one of the 10 best defenses statistically in the NFL. By far my worst prediction. By far my worst take on the year. This Colts defense was awful. The defensive line underachieved greatly. They weren't anywhere close to being top 5 in sacks. The only thing that they were top 10 in defensively was takeaways. And that was it. Everything else was absolutely abysmal. It was awful. Just not good at all. My final Colts prediction before the year started, I said that they'd go 10-7. That didn't happen. They went 8-9. I thought that they'd be a fringe playoff team. The frustrating thing about this one is if Jonathan Taylor doesn't drop that football against the Broncos, then they probably go 9-8, and they probably sneak in, right? Because then, one extra loss for the Broncos, they're 9-8, Colts are 9-8, and they would obviously get in the tiebreaker. So that one's kind of painful, but hey, that's just the way that it goes sometimes. Shout out Otter Creek. Thank you for pointing out something I was right on, saying that my Denver Broncos take was solid. I just took them over 5.5 wins on the year. That felt like the easiest bet on the board. Also took the Commanders over 6.5 wins. Those were two pretty decent decisions on my part. But one that I really like, because I felt like I was on a bit of an island with this one. I said that Bryce Young was going to be way better this year than he was last year. It didn't start off that way. Bryce Young got off to an awful start, but after being benched for Andy Dalton and coming back after Andy Dalton was in a car accident, he went on to play really good football. Okay, he ended up winning twice as many games as he did last year in 4 less starts. His completion percentage was higher. He threw for more touchdowns in less games this year than he did last year. He threw less interceptions. His QBR went up by 20 points. His passer rating went up by 10 points. He was much better. Part of that is the new coach. I think part of that is him just learning how to play quarterback in the NFL. If you want super duper glass half full, Bryce Young improving gives you a little bit of hope for Anthony Richardson. Maybe you, not me. I think I'm officially dropping Anthony Richardson as a client going forward. Next, we're going to move into the AFC South. Probably my second worst take on the year. I said Stephon Diggs to the Texans is overrated, and it was. And I said that the Jags would win the AFC South. Look, the Texans finished at 10-7. I think I was right in the idea that they weren't as good as everybody thought that they were going to be. People were really excited about Stephon Diggs and, third big-time receiver. He obviously tears his ACL, but even when he was playing, I think he was pretty clearly the second best receiver at best, probably the third behind Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Even if he'd played all year, I still think that the Texans would have finished at 10-7. They weren't very good this year. The difference and the reason why this take ended up being wrong is because the Jags were awful, right? Finished, second to last in the AFC South. I'm just going to blame it on Trevor Lawrence being hurt, just to make myself feel better about being wrong. I did hit on the idea that the Chiefs and Lions would be the 1 seeds. Got this one right. They had the 2 best records in the NFL. Both finished at 15-2. And I think my favorite thing just about this fact of the Chiefs and Lions being the 1 seeds is that they both do it so entirely differently. Like the Chiefs are a little more, I guess, calculated. It's a lot of reliance upon the defense to get starts or to get stops. And then it's like, Patrick Mahomes, can you be great in the fourth quarter? And the answer is yes, because he's Patrick Mahomes and he's always great in the fourth quarter, led the NFL in game-winning drives this year. So they kind of rely on that. And then you look at the Lions and it's like, we rely on toughness. And we rely on these awesome weapons that we have on offense. We're going to run the football. We've got a great offensive line. Like they're built entirely differently. They're coached completely differently. And they both had a ton of success, which I just think is awesome. Teams approaching the game differently is always a good thing. Something that I am going to miss on, but still feel pretty good about saying was I said that Jared Goff or Patrick Mahomes would win the MVP. Neither one of them are going to. But the premise of the take still stands. I do believe that Josh Allen is going to be the MVP. He's minus 420 in sportsbooks the last time that I checked. And he's the starting quarterback of the 2 seed in the AFC. Coming into the season, 7 of the last 10 players to win the MVP had been a 1 seed for the playoffs in either conference. For 12 years in a row now, however, the MVP winner will be if Josh Allen wins, the MVP winner will be the quarterback of the 1 or 2 seed in either conference. Look, if you want to bet MVP winners in the future, sit back, figure out who's going to be the 1 or 2 seed, and then just bet any one of those 4 quarterbacks, and you're going to have a pretty decent chance at making some money on that. Another one of my takes that is still alive, I still feel pretty good about. Before the season started, I predicted that the Chiefs would beat the Rams in the Super Bowl to become the first team in the history of the NFL to three-peat. I hope this happens because I've got a great monologue pretty much already written out defending why Patrick Mahomes would then become the best quarterback ever and why Andy Reid would become the best coach ever. So this is still on the board. The Chiefs continue to be the best team in the NFL. The Rams, they're healthy for this playoff run. I feel incredibly good about them. I do think that they are the dark horse to pick. If you wanted to pick Green Bay, I would get that. But look, they're healthy. They've got the best quarterback in the NFC in Matthew Stafford, a guy who's won a Super Bowl, a head coach in Sean McVay who is outstanding, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, both very healthy, a young, surging defense. Jared Verse, rookie edge rusher, was everything that Laiatu Latu was supposed to be. So like they can rush the passer. They're pretty solid on the back end, and they've got this outstanding offense fueled by two great receivers and an outstanding Hall of Fame level quarterback in Matthew Stafford. The last thing that I got right, and probably the take that I'm most proud of, the one that I got the most crap for, I said that the San Francisco 49ers would miss the playoffs, and they did. I just can't help but smile. Youth is incredibly important, I think, in every single sport, and especially in the NFL, because games are incredibly physical. And the 49ers had the most 30-year-olds on their roster than any other team in the NFL. They had the oldest roster in the NFL. And it's not only an old roster, it's an old roster that's played a lot of games because they've been on these deep playoff runs. And because of that, they had a lot of guys get hurt. Deebo Samuel wasn't as good as he has been in the past. Brandon Ayuk tore his ACL. George Kittle was really the only guy who consistently stayed healthy. Trent Williams, starting left tackle, he got hurt a lot. And I like Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's a really solid option at quarterback. The issue with Brock Purdy is he's not Mahomes, Allen, or Lamar, or Justin Herbert, or Joe Burrow, where when guys get hurt, he's gifted enough to kind of elevate everybody else. That's kind of the issue with Brock Purdy. With that being said, San Francisco should pay him because it's hard to find good quarterbacks in the NFL. So, yeah, those were the 10 big takes that I made before the season started. I think I had a pretty decent year in terms of being right and wrong. Had some really bad misses, had some really good hits, though, as well. Learned some lessons that I don't think I have enough time to really run through, but I think that the biggest one is just the importance of having a presence about you as a head coach. I know that I oftentimes get caught up in who's the best play caller, X's and O's type stuff, because that's the stuff that we see as fans. But at the same time, being a head coach, I need this like written somewhere where I can see it every day. But being a head coach is so much more than just X's and O's. It is dealing with players, getting guys to buy in, earning the respect of the locker room, getting guys to show up on time to treatment and to meetings. And I heard Mike McDaniel, the head coach of the Dolphins today, explain why he doesn't fine guys for being late to meetings. He doesn't think that it fixes it. And so, like which is just incredible to me. I'd be finding the crap out of those dudes. Anyway, and so like being a head coach is so much more than that. And I think we're seeing that on full display in Detroit with Dan Campbell. I don't know if Shane Steichen has that. I think X's and O's wise, he's a pretty smart guy, makes some dumb choices sometimes, running trick plays in big spots. But for the most part, I think in terms of X's and O's, I think that Shane Steichen's fine. The issue is I just don't know if he commands the room like a Mike Vrabel, like a Bill Belichick, like a Nick Saban. And you look at Dan Campbell, I think he commands a room better than any other head coach in the NFL. Andy Reid, you could argue, maybe a little bit better. They just do it differently, so it doesn't feel as commanding when Andy Reid does it compared to Dan Campbell, because Dan Campbell's yelling and veins are popping out of his neck. Meanwhile, you got Andy Reid walking into the locker room in like a Santa Claus outfit. So, I mean, it's different. But I do think that that's one of my two biggest takeaways from the year is just the importance in hiring a head coach who commands the locker room at an intense level where he has the respect of everyone in the locker room. I am not convinced that Shane Steichen has that. And I think the only way to really reset that would be to clean house and get rid of a lot of these players, which needs to happen anyway, because there's just a lot of losers on this Indianapolis Colts team. And so, I really wish that the Colts were kind of resetting across the board. I think that's where I've landed on everything, but that's not going to happen. Hopefully we're going to get a Chris Ballard press conference here soon where we can play a little bit of Ballard bingo. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to tune into the Real Jonathan Smith Show. I will be back again on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. The Dan Dockett Show is on from noon to 3, and that starts here in about 5 minutes.